23 years ago, in a peaceful town in the heart of Georgia, a 12-year-old girl named Emily Harper vanished from her own home. No screams, no footprints, just a silver bracelet, engraved with the letters EH glinting in the early morning sun. The police initially thought the girl had run away, but no one knew that on that very night, a black Dodge Charger had left the neighborhood in silence. Day after day, flyers covered every utility pole, and the father, the first to report her missing, was the last anyone dared to suspect. No body, no evidence, just a mystery that left Thomasville chilled for years. But then 2 decades later, as technology advanced beyond human imagination, forgotten data began to speak, a drop of blood hidden under the car mat, a phone signal in the dead of night, and a message never sent. "I didn't mean to," she was screaming. Those fragments, scattered over 23 years, are gradually leading the police to the truth buried deep beneath the damp Georgia soil, where time seemed to have erased all traces, but instead unwittingly preserved everything. This story is not just about a disappearance, but about the tireless journey of justice, of technology, and of a girl once forgotten by the world. Before we dive deep into this cold case that shook all of Georgia, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe the truth never dies, hit subscribe to join us in reopening files dusted over for more than 2 decades. Thomasville, Georgia, early summer 2002. The small town in southern Georgia was bathed in the pale golden light of dusk, the air heavy with the scent of dry earth and pine resin. The steady chirp of cicadas mingled with the hum of a lawnmower from a neighbor's yard. Pine Hollow Street was as peaceful as ever, white picket fences, wide porches, windows casting warm lamplight. In house number 214, 12-year-old Emily Harper sat leaning against the living room table, intently drawing. A light blue-colored pencil rolled off the floor. She bent to pick it up, mumbling along to the tune from the old radio. In the garage, David Harper, her 36-year-old father, was tinkering with a broken electric fan. He sipped a beer while fixing it, sweat trickling down his collar. They rarely spoke to each other in the evenings, just 2 parallel lives in silence. The wall clock struck 8. Emily stood up, stepped out to the yard, leading her little dog named Sparky. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Margaret Summers, was watering her plants and saw the girl wave lightly. She was still wearing a pale yellow t-shirt, jean shorts, her hair in a loose ponytail. Mrs. Summers remembered smiling back, but when she turned to get the watering can again, the girl's shadow had vanished behind the row of trees. The sky darkened quickly, street lights flickered on, casting a hazy glow, and the neighborhood fell back into the familiar stillness of a summer evening. In the Harper house, the fan was now working, its whirring blades blending with the faint news on the radio. No one noticed the drawing table still open, the white paper half finished with an unfinished sketch. That night, there were no strange noises, no footsteps, just the wind rustling through the porch. When the sun rose, the first light filtered through the curtains, illuminating the empty living room. Emily's chair still had her thin jacket draped over the back, colored pencils scattered on the floor. David walked in, looked around, called her name a few times, then went out to the yard, over to the neighbors to ask. No one knew where the girl was. After a few minutes of silence, he returned home, picked up the landline, and dialed emergency. His voice was hoarse and trembling. "My daughter is missing." On the other end of the line, the dispatcher answered calmly, "Thomas County Dispatch, please state the nature of the emergency." David was silent for a few seconds before whispering, "I woke up this morning, and she wasn't here anymore." The shift operator quickly noted the details, instructed to preserve the scene, and immediately transferred the call to the Criminal Investigations Division. Just 30 minutes after the missing person call was received, the wail of police sirens cracked the familiar peace like a fissure. 2 officers stepped out of the car, the front door already ajar. David Harper stood waiting in a rigid stance, his eyes ringed with dark circles from lack of sleep. He said nothing until the officer asked, "Are you the one who called in the missing child?" David nodded, his voice hoarse. "I got up early, saw the back door open, thought she went to a friend's, but now, I don't know where she is." In the small living room, the sofa was pushed askew. Emily's drawing paper still lay on the table, colored pencils scattered on the floor. There were no signs of disturbance, no cries or traces indicating anything unusual, just an eerie, stark absence, as if the girl had dissolved from the house in silence. Mrs. Dorothy Harper, David's mother, arrived just as the investigation team was documenting the scene. She was hastily dressed in an old robe, breathing heavily, her hands trembling as she clutched a faded photo of her granddaughter. Upon seeing the empty room, she exclaimed, "She never goes anywhere without telling me. She's afraid of the dark, afraid of getting lost." Then she looked straight at her son. "Are you sure you don't know anything?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Detective Ron Avery, assigned to lead the case, entered that heavy atmosphere. He carried a leather-bound notebook, flipping open the first page and jotting quick notes as he surveyed the house. He moved slowly, scrutinizing every small detail, the position of the chair, a dry mud streak near the back door, and the father's evasive gaze. No accusations were voiced, just a prolonged silence that made everyone more uneasy. Avery turned to David. "When was the last time you remember seeing your daughter?" "Last night," David replied, "around when I was fixing the fan. She was drawing, and after that, I don't know, I went to bed, and in the morning she was gone." Mrs. Dorothy stood silent, clutching the photo tightly. "Emily wouldn't leave the house in the middle of the night," she said softly, as if to herself. One of the young officers tried to reassure, "Maybe she went to a friend's, she'll be back soon." But Dorothy's eyes didn't believe it. She just stared at the room where the drawing paper lay unfinished, the half-drawn lines like they were interrupted mid-breath. Outside, the wind began to pick up, carrying the scent of pine resin and river dampness. A few neighbors gathered in the yard, whispering among themselves. Mrs. Margaret Summers, the last to see Emily, stood back by the fence. When Avery asked, she recounted that the night before, the girl had taken the little dog out to the yard, smiling, waving hello, then gone back inside. "Just a few minutes," she said, "and then no one saw her anymore." Her words left everyone silent. Reporters from the local paper arrived earlier than expected, cameras in hand, questions firing rapidly. Avery stepped out, asking them to keep their distance, saying only briefly, "A missing person case is under investigation." No further comment. But that noon, the short news bulletin still ran the headline, "12-year-old girl missing in Thomasville." Inside, Dorothy sat on the sofa, hands gripping her granddaughter's photo, eyes fixed on the window, where sunlight was gradually spilling onto the empty yard. David paced back and forth, answering each question, but his voice was so flat and dry that Avery had to pause for a moment, observing his reactions. "Do you often argue with your daughter?" Avery asked. "No, just little things," David said, then turned his face away. When the officers left, Dorothy still hadn't moved from the chair. She whispered, "If she's scared, she's probably hiding somewhere. Someone has to find her." Avery placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will find her." Outside, the late afternoon golden streaks had stretched long across the quiet street. The police car rolled slowly past the row of trees, its lights reflecting off the Harper house windows. In the living room, Emily's drawing paper lay still, a half-drawn blue pencil line depicting a path leading to a distant forest. No one noticed that detail, just as no one knew that drawing would be the last image of the girl anyone could hold on to. The search began as soon as the sun crested the pines along the Ocklawahnee River banks. The morning air was thick with the scent of damp earth, wild grass, and the sweat of volunteers lining up for orders. On the dirt road leading to the forest edge, Thomasville police set up a temporary tent as command center. Inside spread a map marked with red dots for search directions. Detective Ron Avery's voice rang steady and firm. "We'll sweep from the south bank of the river, fanning out. If you see any sign, don't touch it. Call forensics." Everyone nodded, silent. The tracking dogs barked short and eager before being released. The Ocklawahnee River wound through the dense forest, its murky water heavy with mud scent. Each team pushed deep into the branches, hearing only rustling dry leaves and occasional whistles signaling positions. The heat rose with the wind, sunlight piercing leaf gaps to dissolve the morning mist, revealing dark soil streaks along the grassy banks. A rescue worker bent down, pointing to something glinting in the light. Upon picking it up, he saw a small white plastic sandal, child-sized, with a broken strap. Nearby, the soil was lightly disturbed, as if someone had paused or sat down. The other sandal was found a few steps away, tipped over, dusted with a thin layer. The entire area was immediately cordoned off. Avery arrived shortly after, staring at the pair of sandals in silence for a long time, then ordered, "Collect soil samples around it, log the exact position, photograph the scene." This could be the end point. When the tracking dogs were released again, they scented westward, toward the dirt road leading straight to the small highway, cutting through the forest. Emily's footprints, small, shallow, flickered on the soft ground, interspersed with larger, clearer adult shoe prints. Then just a few meters from the road's edge, all traces stopped, as if both had vanished at once. Avery crouched down, using a soil probe, noticing old tire tracks at the roadside edge, not distinct enough for a match. He noted it, his voice lowering. "Stop, point here, no drag marks, no blood." Possible victim entered a vehicle. News of the sandals' discovery spread quickly. By noon, the forest area was fully sealed off. Police set up checkpoints on the road leading to the highway. Passing vehicles were stopped. Drivers questioned if they'd seen any girl the night before. Most just shook their heads. A truck driver vaguely said he'd seen taillights of a small car parked near the forest edge late evening, but couldn't recall the license plate. In the preliminary report, Avery noted, "Possible vehicle sighting near scene." By afternoon, the investigation team shifted to security cameras in the area. In 2002, cameras were rare, and footage grainy, but a small gas station a few miles from the Harper house had a VHS recording system. The manager brought out the tape from the night before for police. They loaded it into the player, the screen flickering with static. In the black and white frame, near the tape's end, a silver Dodge Charger pulled up to pump gas. The timestamp in the bottom corner, just after 9 p.m. Avery sat before the screen, gripping his pen tightly. He asked the manager, "Do you recognize the driver?" The man squinted, replying softly, "I think that's Mr. Harper. I've seen that car drive through here many times." The tape was seized as evidence. Compared to David's statement that he left home after 11 p.m. for work, the footage timestamp was nearly 2 hours earlier. A significant gap he couldn't explain. Avery said nothing, just marked it in red ink in his notebook. Inconsistency, timeline conflict. Late afternoon, as the search team withdrew, the sun hung low, light filtering through tree layers in yellowish bands. No one spoke, just the sound of boots on wet ground. The small sandals were placed in sealed bags, alongside soil and grass samples. Before leaving the forest, Avery turned back to gaze at the long dirt road leading to the highway, where the footprints abruptly ended. He felt something off, too clean, too quiet, as if someone had meticulously planned to erase every trace. That evening, at the office, he spread the freshly printed photos across the desk. Images of the sandals, faint tire tracks, the gas station frame. In the room lit only by yellow lamplight, Avery stood still, staring at the photo of the small sandals until their white seemed to glow in his eyes. An officer entered, asking softly, "What do you think, sir?" Avery replied, "The girl didn't leave on her own. Someone took her away from here." His voice was low and certain, as if confirming what everyone had feared voicing since morning. That morning at the Thomasville Police Department, the interrogation room was stark under harsh white light. David Harper sat across from investigator Ron Avery, a gas receipt and printed photos from the station's security camera laid out before them. Avery spoke slowly. "You insist you left home at what time?" David replied immediately, "Around 11 at night, I was heading to my night shift." Avery slid the receipt toward him, the timestamp clear, 9:47 p.m. Thomasville gas station. "The station clock could be wrong," David said quickly, his voice dry and raspy. "I don't remember exactly." Avery nodded, jotting a brief note in his notebook. "Subject adjusts timeline, second version." But the receipt wasn't the only inconsistency. When police called David's workplace, the supervisor said he arrived late and left earlier than usual, citing a headache. The time log showed a nearly 2-hour gap. When asked about it, David only said, "I needed to step out for some air. I was exhausted." Avery looked up, his tone even. 2 hours, and no one knows where you were." David fell silent, his gaze shifting away. Avery changed tactics. He pulled a photo from his pocket of a small pair of sandals found at the forest edge and placed it on the table. "Do you recognize this?" David glanced at it quickly and nodded. "Emily's. I bought them for her last month." "Do you know why they were near the highway?" "She used to play around there. Probably just fell off." Avery closed his notebook without comment, but a chill settled in his gut. That afternoon, the investigative team returned to the Harper house for another sweep. The interior was entirely different from the day before. Spotless, orderly to an eerie degree. The fan repair tools, beer cans and stacks of newspapers had all vanished. The air carried a faint scent of cleaning chemicals. Avery asked, "Did you clean anything this morning?" "I just wiped things down. Wanted to forget about this." He glanced down at David's hands, noticing the raw red skin on his index finger. David forced a smile, probably from the chemicals. Avery didn't respond, just wrote possible cleanup after event. When Avery asked about the father-daughter relationship, David answered steadily, like reciting from memory, "We're fine. She just had her little tantrums, like any kid." But Dorothy Harper, his mother, told a different story. They argued a few days before. She wanted to go back to her mom. When Avery brought it up, David sighed, "Just a misunderstanding. I didn't want her thinking her mom abandoned her." The words sounded more like a defense than an explanation. That night, Avery reviewed the full recording of the interrogation. Every time the timeline came up, David altered details, once 11 o'clock, then maybe 10:30. Experience told Avery, the innocent remember precisely, those hiding something don't. He added a line in red ink, "Subject exhibits inconsistent statements, possible deception." Meanwhile, the forensics team sent a preliminary report. Large shoe prints found at the forest edge matched the athletic shoes David owned, the pair police discovered in the garage. The soles still clung to dark soil similar to samples from the scene. When questioned, David only said, "I wear those all the time. The dirt must have stuck from before." The tidy answer only heightened Avery's unease. Neighbors were called in for re-interviews. Mrs. Margaret Summers recalled seeing headlights flash in front of the Harper house the evening Emily vanished, earlier than David's stated time. Another swore they heard a car door slam, clear as day in the quiet night. Those seemingly trivial memory fragments, pieced together, began to unravel the father's story. The next day, the investigative team returned to seize evidence. When they popped the trunk of the Dodge Charger, a wave of cleaning chemical fumes poured out, thick and choking. The car's floor mats gleamed spotless, no dust, no debris, as if freshly replaced. Avery glanced at David. He only said, "I cleaned the car to clear my head." Avery bent to note it, without replying, but a steely glint flashed in his eyes. That evening, in his small office, Avery spread photos and notes across the desk, the small sandals, tire tracks, an image of the Dodge Charger at the gas station. On the wall, the timeline diagram bristled with red arrows. In the center, a bold handwritten note in black ink, stood out, 9:47 p.m., confirmed departure. He stared at it for a long moment, then murmured to himself, "The girl didn't leave the house on her own. Someone took her, and I fear that someone was sitting right across from me this morning." Outside the window, Thomasville's night sank back into silence. In the darkness, the cicadas droned dry and steady, like the pulse of an unanswered question. 3 days after Emily Harper vanished, the investigation expanded beyond the Pine Hollow neighborhood. The press kept running her photo with bold headlines, "Missing 12-year-old in Thomasville." As answers from the father grew contradictory, police were forced to consider the second possibility: kidnapping. A night shift worker at a nearby convenience store called the tip line, saying that on the night Emily disappeared, he'd seen a white pickup truck parked near the neighborhood, license plate with an M and a 4, driven by a middle-aged man in a baseball cap. The tip spurred the entire team into action. Tracing the description, they uncovered a name in the local offender database: Larry Jenkins, 42, previously convicted of assaulting a minor, now living in a rundown trailer on the forest's edge, about 6 miles from the Harpers. His truck matched the witness description. The next morning, police cars pulled up to the sagging trailer, weeds choking the path. Jenkins opened the door, eyes bloodshot, voice gravelly, "I didn't do anything wrong." Avery presented the search warrant and entered with 2 officers. The trailer reeked of damp and cigarette smoke, walls plastered with photos of young actresses, the table cluttered with old magazines. In the bedroom, police found a child's pink shirt draped over a chair, and a few strands of blonde hair caught in the bedding. A young officer froze, glancing at Avery. "Bag it all. Videotape the scene," he said curtly. When questioned, Jenkins smirked, picked it up from the dump. "Gonna sell the fabric, probably from the last tenant." The explanation grated on the team, but they stuck to protocol. Jenkins was hauled to headquarters for interrogation. He claimed he'd been home watching TV that night, hadn't gone out. When Avery asked about the truck, he said he'd only driven to buy beer, a couple hours before dark. His calm demeanor made Avery hard to read him, but the items in the trailer, the kid's shirt, blonde hairs, an old doll, left no one at ease. Samples were rushed for DNA testing. 2 days later, results came back no match to Emily Harper. Fingerprints and hair samples cleared him. On top of that, Jenkins had an alibi. A mechanic at the auto shop confirmed he'd been there all evening, around the time Emily vanished. The grainy camera caught him sitting in the waiting area, coffee cup in hand. The report stated flatly, "Suspect cleared, verifiable alibi." Avery finished reading and tossed his pen on the desk. He didn't like Jenkins, but the facts were clear. The man with the sordid past wasn't involved. In a brief team meeting the next day, Avery told the group, "The kidnapping theory collapses. No signs of forced entry, no ransom demands, and the only stranger has an alibi." A young officer asked, "So we go back to Mr. Harper?" Avery paused a few seconds, then said quietly, "I'm afraid so." The media pounced on the story. The morning paper ran, "Pedophile suspect cleared in Emily Harper case." The small town sank into a mix of relief and unease. Folks started whispering, "If not a stranger, then where did the girl go?" That afternoon, Avery returned to the woods where the sandals were found. Hot wind rustled through the old pines, carrying scents of damp earth and decaying leaves. He crouched to examine the narrow dirt path leading to the highway. The tire marks faded. In his mind, the evidence fragments circled back: the gas receipt, shifting timelines, impossibly clean car mats, and now the collapsed kidnapping theory. It all formed a loop, with the lying father at its center. That night, Avery sat alone in his office. On the desk was a photocopy of Emily's photo, next to a red-inked note he'd written. No forced entry, known party involvement likely. He closed his eyes, recalling David's face from the first interrogation: cold stare, even tone, not a hint of panic. Outside, a light rain pattered on the window, leaving long streaks like smudged ink. In Avery's mind, only one thought remained. This case wasn't out there in the house, it was right inside it. With the kidnapping angle crumbling, Ron Avery returned to the Pine Hollow house with a wholly different mindset. Now, he believed something had happened inside this home, not out there, not by some stranger. As soon as he stepped in, a faint chemical scent in the air made him pause. The living room was obsessively tidy, as if freshly scrubbed. No dust, no signs of disturbance, everything arranged with chilling precision. A forensics tech greeted him with a stack of photos from the initial sweep. Avery lingered on one showing the living room carpet rolled back at a corner, revealing brighter circular patches on the underlying concrete. He asked, "Have we tested this spot?" "Not yet, but there's a strong Clorox smell," the tech replied. When they lifted the real carpet, the odor hit immediately. One corner had been neatly cut away, the fibers still fresh. Avery looked at David, leaning against the wall, and asked softly, "Why cut it?" David answered quickly, "I spilled paint, scrubbed forever but couldn't get it out, so I cut it off." His voice was eerily calm. Avery just noted briefly in his book, "Paint explanation, unverified." In the garage, the forensics team found an open Clorox bottle, half full, next to a trash bin piled with wet white rags. When asked, David said, "I was wiping machine oil. That fan I fixed was filthy." A young officer tilted his head and whispered, "Not many use Clorox on fans." Avery only said, "Seal it all." That same afternoon, they shone luminol on the living room concrete floor. Blue glows appeared, spreading in faint curved streaks, the shape of splatters. Not much, but distinct. A tech murmured, "If it was paint, it wouldn't light up like this." Avery watched the trembling glow in the dark, quietly noting, possible cleanup after incident. David stood by the doorway, arms crossed, composed. "You guys suspect me. I just wanted the house clean." Avery met his eyes, and replied softly, "We don't suspect anyone. Just making sure we don't miss anything." David pursed his lips. "If you want to find my daughter, look out there. Don't scrutinize every floor mark." The words hung the room in dead silence. Chemical analysis results arrived 2 days later. The residue from the concrete wasn't paint, but a mix containing sodium hypochlorite and human hemoglobin, traces of blood bleached with Clorox. Still, the amount left was too scant for DNA separation. The Stark report left Avery silent for a long stretch. He couldn't charge yet, but he knew he'd brushed the iceberg's hidden mass. That evening, Avery returned to the Harper house alone. The kitchen light cast a sickly yellow glow, the air laced with bleach. He paused at the cut carpet spot, envisioning the scene, the girl falling, blood spraying, then someone silently cleaning it up. Behind him, Dorothy Harper's voice rose softly, "They found something, didn't they?" He turned to see her clutching a photo frame of her granddaughter. "We're not sure yet," Avery said. "Might just be paint cleaner." She shook her head, tears falling. "My son couldn't hurt her." Avery didn't reply. In his eyes, her certainty only weighed the matter heavier. The next day, police seized the remaining carpet section and the Clorox bottle from the garage. As the forensics van pulled away, David stood on the porch watching, showing no resistance. His face was blank, eyes vacant. Neighbors peered from windows, murmuring guesses. Avery paid no mind. For him, those blue streaks on the concrete had said enough. In his end-of-day report, he wrote no signs of forced entry. Clorox bleach marks in living room. Sample contains human blood traces, insufficient for DNA. Homeowner reactions cold, statements inconsistent. Recommend expanded testing. As he signed off, Avery looked up through the dark window. The street remained peaceful, street lamps casting gold on silent roofs. But for him, from the moment the luminol glowed in that room, peace in the Harper house had officially vanished. After weeks of combing through forests, rivers, and the open lands around Thomasville, the investigation into Emily Harper's case gradually hit a dead end. No body, no confirmatory DNA, no witnesses who had seen the little girl after the night she vanished. The traces in the house, the bleached bloodstains, the cut carpet, the Clorox bottle, only raised suspicions, not enough to bring charges. The meetings grew repetitive, revolving around the same old question: where did the girl go? Ron Avery still believed the answer lay in that house, but all the evidence was too faint. He showed up at the office every day, watching the stack of files grow thicker with nothing new. The maps pinned to the wall were dotted with red pushpins, places that had been dug up, where cadaver dogs had alerted, where shoe prints were found. It was all meaningless dots. When he suggested expanding the search to neighboring states, his superiors just said, "No probable cause. We need a body or DNA." Time passed, and the press and public cooled off. The missing person flyers faded in the wind, stuck to telephone poles. The people of Thomasville started to accept that the 12-year-old girl might be lost forever. Even the investigative team lost its drive. A young officer whispered to Avery, "Maybe Mr. Harper's telling the truth. Maybe the kid ran away." Avery didn't respond. He knew the gut feeling inside him wasn't wrong, but hunches weren't enough to prove anything in court. In early 2004, the district attorney's office sent an official notice: the case was suspended. All evidence was sealed and transferred to the GBI Cold Case Unit in Atlanta. During the handover, the technician asked Avery what reason to log in the file. He held the pen, hesitated for a few seconds, then wrote, "Insufficient evidence for prosecution." On a muggy afternoon, he personally carried the file box to the storage warehouse. On the lid was a label: Harper, Emily, missing person. He stood still for a long moment, hand resting on the cold cardboard, before placing it on the shelf among hundreds of other missing persons cases. When the warehouse keeper asked if he wanted to add any notes, he quietly replied, "Primary suspect David Harper, insufficient evidence." After that, David sold the house and left Pine Hollow without a word of goodbye. No one knew where he went. Mrs. Dorothy Harper stayed behind, placing flowers on the porch every morning, keeping her granddaughter's room just as it had been when she was alive. Every year she called Avery, asking just one question: "Do you think she's still alive?" And every time he answered, "I don't know, but I've never forgotten her." When the case was classified as inactive, Avery wrote the final line in his notebook: "No body, no confession, no closure." Then he closed the book and turned off the office light. In the darkness, he still believed that someday, the evidence left behind in that house would speak up. But until then, the Emily Harper case was just a small name among hundreds of dusty files. A question without an answer waiting for the justice of time. 22 years after Emily Harper disappeared, that name was nearly forgotten in Thomasville. The old house on Pine Hollow Road had been repainted, and the new owners knew nothing about the little girl who had once lived there. But in the GBI Cold Case Unit storage warehouse in Atlanta, the file box with case number TH02-1467 still sat quietly, labeled Harper, Emily. Missing person. In early 2024, Detective Laura Henderson was assigned to the Cold Case Unit. She was just over 30, known for her meticulousness and sharp instincts, having previously worked as a crime scene forensic technician. On her first day in the file warehouse, she walked between the dusty shelves, listening to the keeper say, "Every box here is a voice silenced by time." As she ran her hand over the faded labels, she paused at the name Harper, Emily. That evening, Henderson opened the file in the reading room. The paper was yellowed, the ink smudged, but the records were still clear: the 947 gas receipt, the shifting alibis, and the final line in Ron Avery's report. Primary suspect, David Harper, insufficient evidence. Amid the documents, she found a handwritten note in blue ink: "Car floor mats removed before inspection. Retest if future tech allows." That line made her stop. She checked the evidence inventory. It included the Dodge Charger floor mats and living room carpet samples, all sealed in 2003, never reopened. Henderson knew that 2024 technology was worlds apart. With trace DNA techniques, even a skin cell or decades-old blood stain could match a sample. She immediately drafted a report, proposing to re-examine the evidence. In the memo to her superior, Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cole, she wrote objective, extract trace DNA from vehicle carpet for familial identification. When she presented it to him, Cole looked surprised. This one's ancient, no body, no witnesses. Henderson replied, but there is evidence that hasn't been heard yet. 3 weeks later, the request was approved. On March 18, Henderson personally oversaw the unsealing of the Harper evidence box. The old nylon bag still bore red wax seals. Inside was the dingy gray, 2001 Dodge Charger floor mat, frayed at the edges, still carrying a faint chemical smell. She gloved up, leaned in close, and noticed a few singed fibers, signs of strong bleach. If blood was ever here, we'll know, she murmured. The evidence was rushed to the GBI's central lab. While waiting, Henderson tracked down Ron Avery, now retired in Macon. The former investigator was silver-haired, but sharp-minded. When she mentioned the Harper case, he just sighed. I knew there was blood, I just couldn't prove it. Back then, the tech was like a dull knife. You knew where the wound was but had no way to cut it open. He looked at her, voice firm. If you can do what I couldn't, don't quit halfway. 3 days later, Henderson got an email from the lab. Trace hemoglobin detected on vehicle carpet, possible human origin. DNA extraction in progress. The blood sample was so minute, it required 3 rounds of amplification. She barely left her phone for 72 hours, sitting in her office staring at Emily's photo pinned to the board. The little girl with blonde hair, a closed-lipped smile, eyes quietly, as if trying to say something she never got to. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the phone rang. It was the lab director on the other end, voice calm but clear. We have results. The trace DNA matches the reference sample from Dorothy Harper. Direct kinship. Henderson gripped the receiver tightly, her eyes fixed on the words missing person. She didn't need anyone to explain. The blood in the car was Emily's. That evening, she printed the report and placed it on the command desk. Lieutenant Colonel Cole read it through, then looked up. 22 years. You want to reopen the whole case? Henderson replied, not reopen to finish it. A moment of silence, then the red stamp came down on the final page. Case Harper reopened for active investigation. A few days later, Henderson visited the old scene in Pine Hollow. The Harper house now belonged to others, fresh paint covering every trace, but standing on the porch, she still felt an eerie emptiness. In her mind, the pieces began to fit, the conflicting alibis, the cut carpet, the cleaned car, and now the child's blood in the trunk. She knew everything was just beginning. When Henderson returned to the office, Avery had already called. I heard his voice trembled but joyful. I told you science would finally speak for the girl. Henderson smiled, looking at the old file box on her desk, now with a new label added, Status Active Investigation, Reopened 2024. She said softly, almost to herself, we didn't forget you, Emily. We just waited until justice could hear your voice. 22 years later, from a few drops of overlooked blood in the car mat's fibers, the case thought buried under the dust of time, suddenly came alive, opening the curtain on a new investigation that Georgia would never forget. In the GBI lab in Atlanta, the samples from the Emily Harper case were unsealed after more than 2 decades. Amid the dust of time, the forensic specialists began using trace DNA technology to scan every old fiber of the Dodge Charger floor mat. Under the microscope, a faint brown streak smaller than a pen tip appeared, a trace blood stain thought long gone. When the results flashed on the screen, the lead forensic technician looked up at Detective Laura Henderson. We have the genetic sequence. The blood sample belongs to someone with direct kinship to Dorothy Harper. Henderson stood silent, staring at the bold printed line, direct kinship confirmed. 99.99%. There was no doubt anymore. It was Emily's blood. The next morning, she brought the results to the Cold Case Unit office. Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cole read through it, set the report down, his gaze heavy. 22 years, he said. Maybe the girl finally gets to speak. Henderson just nodded. In her heart, every doubt Avery had back then was now validated. The bleached blood on the car mat couldn't be coincidence. That same day, the tech team was sent to the Thomasville evidence warehouse to unseal the 2001 Dodge Charger, the evidence, untouched for 2 decades. The car sat in a corner of the warehouse, thick with dust but still in its original shape. When the trunk lid was opened, a sharp chemical smell mixed with old rubber wafted out. Under flashlight beams, they spotted an empty Clorox bottle, yellowed shell, tucked in the right corner, and clear cuts in the floor mat. Henderson leaned down, lightly touching the singed edging where gray threads matched the tested sample. When the forensics team shone the luminol light, a quiet blue glow flickered to life, small spots connecting from the middle of the floor to the trunk wall. A technician whispered, "This isn't random. There's blood here, and it was once more than that." Henderson stood motionless, watching the glowing streaks like calls from the past. She knew Emily didn't die in the car, but the car had carried her away. 2 days later, the full report came back, under the floor mat. Human DNA, matching kinship to Dorothy Harper. On the trunk wall, traces of Clorox mixed with hemoglobin. Next to the bleach bottle, fabric fibers burned by strong oxidation. The GBI's final conclusion read, "Evidence suggests deliberate cleaning of human blood residue. Probable secondary crime scene." Henderson read the last line over and over. Secondary crime scene. That was the missing piece of the puzzle. She reported to command, "The Dodge Charger is a secondary scene. The Harper case needs reclassification to homicide investigation." Cole pondered for a few seconds, then nodded. The red stamp was pressed into the file, ending 22 years of ambiguity between missing and murder. Henderson assembled a small investigative team, focused on reviewing all the old data. On her whiteboard, red arrows connected the Harper house, car, edge of Ocklackney Forest, road to the highway. Every path pointed back to David Harper. "We're no longer searching for the victim," she said. "We're hunting the one who hid the body." That afternoon, she visited Mrs. Dorothy Harper, now in her 80s. The old woman's small house still had granddaughter's photos in every corner. When Henderson announced they'd found Emily's DNA in her son's car, Dorothy trembled but showed no surprise. "I always knew," she said softly. "He never really looked for her. He was just afraid someone would find her." Henderson took her hand, the promise slipping out light as breath. "We'll find the truth, no matter how late." In the following days, her team retraced David's path that night. The 9:47 p.m. gas receipt, the rest stop camera, tire tracks near the woods, and singular phone data showing his device had pinged in the Ocklackney River plantation area. A spot searched in 2002, but left unfinished. Every small piece began to fit like a map folded tight for 20 years. Henderson noted in the interim report, "Vehicle served as transport and cleanup site. Evidence consistent with post-mortem relocation. Intentional concealment probable." That evening, after the investigators had left the office, she sat alone looking at the old file box. A new label on the cover, "Reopened 2024, Homicide." The desk lamp shone on the photo of the 12-year-old girl. Her smile faded in the yellowed paper. Henderson whispered, as if to Emily herself, "The car spoke for you already. Now we'll hear the rest." From a small overlooked bloodstain under the car mat, Thomasville's long-forgotten case finally awoke. And the Dodge Charger, the silent evidence for 2 decades, now became the first witness to accuse the father, who had called in to report his daughter just missing. After confirming Emily's blood was in the Dodge Charger, Detective Laura Henderson shifted her focus to a piece of digital evidence forgotten for over 20 years, The compact Presario computer hard drive seized from the Harper home in 2002. Back then, technology was still crude, and the police only sealed it without ever recovering the data. Henderson believed that if anything revealed David Harper's true thoughts, it was in that dust-covered hard drive. At the GBI Digital Forensics Lab, technicians carefully removed the old IDE drive and connected it to a specialized reader. A faint mechanical whir echoed as the data came back to life after 2 decades. Under the temporary Internet Files folder, Yahoo search queries appeared, faded, but with timestamps intact. Henderson leaned in toward the screen, each line hitting her square in the eyes. How long blood lasts on fabric, where to bury body Georgia, bleach remove DNA. The timestamps showed the searches took place on the evening of May 31, 2002, just 2 days before David reported his daughter missing. Henderson took a deep breath. In the lab's silence, those 3 short questions rang out like a confession. One technician muttered softly, he knew what he was going to do. In the hard drive, she also discovered a folder containing receipts and medical documents. A PDF file titled Thomasville Pharmacy, May 31, 2002, Plan B emergency contraceptive product, paid in cash, no prescription. Henderson frowned. At that time Plan B was only available to adults, and through a doctor. Below the receipt was a handwritten note, cash, no record. The next file made her freeze. Tallahassee Medical Center, June 3, 2002 with content STD evaluation, patient refused full exam. The appointment date matched exactly the morning David called the police. The doctor's note, subject exhibited anxiety, terminated visit prematurely. A dark picture began to emerge, a father carrying a sexually transmitted disease, who had just bought emergency contraceptive, and then his daughter disappeared right after. Henderson printed all the documents, pinning them to the investigation board alongside the map. Red arrows connected the Plan B, the Yahoo queries, the Tallahassee hospital. It all converged in the time frame of May 30, June 3, 2002. When she presented the report to Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cole, he read it through and folded it slowly. What are you implying here, Laura? That the motive wasn't just anger, he was afraid of being exposed. She wrote in the internal memo, digital evidence suggests premeditation and concealment. Search pattern indicates knowledge of forensic cleaning and fear of exposure. That evening, Henderson called Ron Avery, the original investigator on the case. When she told him about the chain of queries, he was silent for a long time before saying softly, I looked into his eyes back then, and saw fear. Now I know what he was afraid of. The next day, Henderson and the tech team sent requests to retrieve old records from Thomasville Pharmacy and Tallahassee Medical Center. Even after more than 20 years, the archived data was still there. Both places confirmed the dates and David Harper's personal information. The pharmacy employee recalled that he looked tense, hands shaking when he paid in cash. The hospital doctor remembered the patient refused testing because he was afraid of the results being on file. Small details, but enough to piece together a familiar pattern: guilt, fear, disposal. Henderson requested further email recovery from the hard drive. Many files were corrupted, but the technicians extracted a draft email that was never sent, titled, We Need to Talk. The content was brief, I can't let anyone find out. Timestamp, June 2, 2002, the night before Emily disappeared. As Henderson read that line, her throat tightened. The evidence was no longer hypothetical. Intent, behavior and efforts to cover it up were all right there in the very computer he had used. She looked up at Emily's photo pinned to the board, a picture of the girl at her 12th birthday party. Now those cold lines of text had become her voice. The official report sent to GBI concluded, recovered data confirms suspect's awareness of forensic risks and purchase of emergency contraceptive prior to victim's disappearance. Motive consistent with sexual assault and subsequent concealment. Lieutenant Colonel Cole read it through, and just nodded. This isn't a simple case anymore, he said. You've just uncovered a motive that no one could prove for 20 years. That night, the cold case unit office was silent. Henderson sat in front of the screen, the line bleach remove DNA, still glowing on the recovery interface. 22 years ago, David Harper had typed that question with the intent to erase all traces. Now it had become the evidence to convict him. Henderson turned off the screen, gathered the file folder, and wrote the final line in the report: digital confession recovered, motive established. Proceed with homicide investigation. She looked up the yellow light reflecting off Emily's old photo. In the silence, Henderson whispered, "Thanks for leaving a trail, David. The technology you feared most has spoken for her now." After the digital evidence clarified the motive, Detective Laura Henderson focused on tracing the journey on the night Emily disappeared, something no one could prove more than 20 years ago. In the old files, she spotted a faint note from Ron Avery, singular log request, unreturned. In 2002, cell phone location data wasn't considered evidence, so the request was dropped. Henderson decided to start over from scratch. She sent a formal request to Did Mobility, the current handler of old singular data, demanding retrieval of David Harper's phone connection history. Recovering information from 2 decades ago was nearly impossible, but luckily, the Dallas Data Center still had a tape backup from June 2002. A week later, the tech team reported, found ping logs in the early morning of June 3. Henderson flew to Dallas. On the screen, the old data lines appeared, each one a coordinate recording where David's phone had connected. Amid thousands of faded characters, she paused at this line: June 3, 2002, 2 hours 12 minutes, and 47 seconds, AM vertical bar tower ID, THM09 vertical bar location, Ochlockonee River Plantation. The location name sent a chill through her. It was the exact spot that in 2002, police had searched and then abandoned due to lack of evidence. Henderson pulled up a satellite map, measuring the distance from the Harper home in Pine Hollow to the plantation area: 19 miles, 25 minutes drive. Perfectly fitting the time frame. David claimed he was working the night shift. Back in Atlanta, she presented the find to Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cole. The data puts him at the disposal site at 2 a.m., she said, meaning he couldn't have been at work like he claimed. Cole frowned. "You sure it's his phone?" Henderson nodded. "Very sure, and there's a gas receipt to prove it." In the old file stack, she found a receipt from Bainbridge gas stop at 1:36 a.m. on June 3. When cross-referenced, the station was right in the middle of the route from the Harper home to Ochlockonee River Plantation. The line regular, 10 gallons, matched the type for David's Dodge Charger. Henderson pointed to the map. Leaves home around 1 a.m. Stops for gas in Bainbridge. Arrives at the river area at 2:12. He wasn't going to work. He was transporting his daughter's body. The tech department helped her reconstruct the route using route simulation software. On the screen appeared 4 red dots connected in a line: Pine Hollow, Bainbridge gas stop, Ochlockonee River Plantation, Thomasville. Each point matched a timestamp, receipt, and phone ping. When the model was complete, Henderson projected it on the meeting room wall, the blue light reflecting off everyone's tense faces. "This is the map of the night of June 3, 2002, she said evenly. "And the last journey of Emily Harper." One investigator asked, "Could someone else have had the phone?" Henderson replied immediately, "No, the gas receipt was signed by him personally, and the station camera footage is blurry, but still shows the man in a black jacket driving that car." No one said another word. She updated the report. Cell tower data and purchase records confirm nocturnal movement from residents to Ochlockonee River area. Timeline consistent with disposal route. Classification homicide. The next afternoon, Henderson drove to meet Ron Avery in Macon. He listened as she recounted it, then went quiet for a few seconds. "I stood at the edge of that area once," he said softly. "We were just steps from the truth, but back then we had no tools to point the way." Henderson gave a sad smile. "Now technology has done the job your intuition always sensed." Avery nodded. "Then don't stop, kid. Bring that girl home." When she returned to Atlanta, Henderson spread the map across the desk. The path was clear. 19 miles of sin, redrawn with data instead of memory. Next to Emily's photo, she wrote in red ink, 2:12 a.m., Ochlockonee River Plantation, probable dump site. The next morning, Cole signed off on the report. On the system, the Harper file was updated with a new header, Evidence Log Update. Cellular location confirms suspect movement to Ochlockonee River Plantation, June 3, 2002. Henderson looked at the line that had just appeared, her heart sinking. 22 years, and every lie finally left a trace, a faint phone signal in the Georgia night, weak but strong enough to lead them to the truth. And from there, the investigation moved to a new phase, finding where Emily Harper had been left behind. In April 2024, Ochlockonee River Plantation came up again, not in an investigation report, but in the Georgia Forestry Commission's routine prescribed burn schedule. For 20 years, this hundreds of acres plot had been left abandoned, overgrown with thick brush and weeds that made it nearly impassable. As the controlled fire spread through, the underbrush burned away, exposing charred bare earth and blackened tree stumps. The next morning, a cleanup crew stumbled upon something peeking out from the burned soil, a small grayish-white bone fragment, lodged between two oak roots. The forest manager called the Thomasville police. Henderson was the first notified. When she heard the word plantation, she just stood still for a few seconds before replying, "Secure the scene, I'm on my way." The GBI SUV rolled down the old dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust, just like the images in the 2002 files. When she arrived, she saw the forensics team had already cordoned off the discovery area with tape. Under the shadow of a blackened tree, a thin silver bracelet lay half buried in the dirt. Henderson knelt down, gently brushing the dust from around it. The light caught the tiny engraved letters, E.H., Emily Harper. She clenched her fist, whispering, 22 years, and you've finally been found. The excavation team got to work. Nearby, they uncovered a femur, ribs, and part of a skull, all scattered within less than 2 meters, covered by roots and burned soil. The bone structure indicated a female victim, age 10, 13. As Henderson watched each fragment being lifted and placed into gloved bags, she didn't look away. Silence enveloped the scene, only the click of cameras, and the wind rustling through half-burned trees. The full remains were transported to the GBI Forensics Lab in Atlanta. It took over 2 weeks to complete the DNA analysis. When the results came back, the bolded line on the report read, "Match confirmed. DNA identical to maternal sample Dorothy Harper." Henderson read each word slowly, then placed her hand on the file. Below, the conclusion was concise. Remains identified as Emily Harper, female, age 12, deceased approximately June 2002. But what haunted her more was the skull examination report. Under CT scan, the frontal bone showed a 4.6 centimeters fracture, extending to the right eye socket, characteristic of blunt force impact, possibly from a hammer, wooden handle, or large rock. The forensics conclusion, perimortem trauma consistent with blunt force, probable cause of death. Henderson read that sentence over and over. In an instant, it all clicked. The night of June 3rd, the car, the blood on the carpet, the route to the plantation, and now the fractured skull. It all fit. When the results were announced, Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cole called an emergency meeting. Henderson presented the full chain of evidence. Victim DNA matches Dorothy Harper. Cell tower data confirms David Harper's route to the disposal site. Blood traces in the car and Clorox evidence prove body transport. Skull injury confirms cause of death as violent impact. Cole said softly, his voice dropping low, "So there's no doubt anymore. This isn't a missing persons case. This is a murder." He looked at Henderson, his eyes a mix of exhaustion and relief. "We've kept Avery's promise." That very afternoon, GBI issued a press release. Remains of missing child Emily Harper, identified after 22 years. Evidence indicates homicide. Investigation continues. The news spread fast. Local stations led the evening broadcast with a ticker. Cold case breakthrough. Missing girl's remains found. People in Thomasville stood silent in front of coffee shop screens, many recalling the blonde girl whose photo had once been plastered on every utility pole. Dorothy Harper, when Henderson personally broke the news, just said through tears, "I knew she was still out there somewhere close to home. Now I can bring her back." The next day, Henderson and the forensics team returned to the scene, one last time to collect soil and ash samples around the discovery area. She stood looking at the half-burned forest, where sunlight filtered through thin smoke, illuminating a small piece of silver chain left behind. A mix of sorrow and peace welled up in her. Emily had been found, but the price of the truth was 22 years of waiting. GBI's final report concluded succinctly: cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull. Manner of death, homicide. As she signed that report, Henderson knew the Emily Harper case had entered its final phase, from a missing persons file to a crime confirmed by bone, blood, and memory. After confirming Emily Harper's remains, Detective Laura Henderson decided to return to the starting point, the old Thomasville Police Department evidence warehouse. She believed that among the dust-covered boxes for 2 decades, there were still overlooked clues. As she stepped into the dimly lit storage room, Henderson saw dozens of file boxes stacked on top of each other, each labeled with numbers in faded marker. She followed the label Harper Evidence 2002, opened the lid, and began flipping through each nylon bag. Among the old documents, she discovered an evidence bag that had never been sent to the lab. Inside was a white bath towel, a pair of rubber gloves, and a strand of blonde hair caught in the fabric folds. The log from back then only noted briefly, recovered from garage laundry bin, untested due to contamination concern. In 2002, DNA separation technology from mixed samples hadn't advanced, so the evidence was shelved. Henderson examined it closely. The seal label was still intact with red wax. "We'll see what they have to say," she whispered. She transferred the entire sample to the GBI forensic lab. 2 days later, the forensic technician called back, "We've extracted DNA from the hair strand. The sample matches Emily Harper's genetic profile perfectly." Henderson nodded, a surge of indescribable emotion rising in her chest. The little girl who once existed was present in every small detail, even the forgotten hair strand for 22 years. But more surprising was the result from the bath towel. When scanned under luminol light, glowing streaks appeared along the towel's edge, spreading out like a pattern. Analysis revealed human blood stains, type O matching the sample collected from the Dodge Charger's carpet. Though minimal in quantity, the results further confirmed that the garage cleanup wasn't just for grease, as David had claimed, but to erase Emily's bloodstains. As for the rubber gloves, the seemingly ordinary evidence, they bore clear signs of disposal behavior. Chemical analysis showed a mixture containing hydrogen peroxide and ammonia, 2 components commonly used to bleach blood and degrade biological DNA. The forensic technician wrote in the report, "Mixture consistent with improvised chemical cleaning solution. Indication of deliberate decontamination process." After reading it, Henderson said softly, he knew what he was doing, and he thought he could wipe it clean. She printed all the new results, pinning them to the board alongside previous evidence: blood in the car, disposal route, skull fracture. In the center of the board, Henderson added in red ink, "Deliberate attempt to destroy biological traces." In a brief meeting at GBI headquarters, Henderson presented the new findings. Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cole flipped through the photos, pausing at the image of the gloves. "Hard to believe they overlooked this." Henderson replied, "That year they had no way to prove it. Now science does the rest." He nodded, his voice low. "With each new piece we see more clearly the coldness of this father." To ensure legal admissibility, Henderson sought out Ron Avery, who had originally seized the evidence. He still had an astonishing memory. "I remember those gloves well," he said. "We found them in the laundry bin, still damp and smelling of chemicals. I thought we should keep them, but the lab back then refused testing due to contamination. Maybe they were afraid of ruining the sample." Henderson smiled sadly. "No one was wrong. Technology just lagged behind the crime. Avery replied softly, "Now justice has caught up." In the new comprehensive report, Henderson listed the sequence of events: hair strand matching victim's DNA, proving the girl was in the garage, where David claimed no one entered. Bath towel stained with blood of the same type as the car sample, confirming actions to wipe wounds or erase traces. Gloves containing biological bleach mixture, demonstrating intentional intent to eliminate evidence. The report's conclusion was typed in bold: "All evidence indicates deliberate post-incident cleanup within suspect's property. Chemical composition consistent with attempts to eliminate biological traces, blood and DNA." After reading it, Cole said just one thing: so he turned his house into a crime washing room. That evening, Henderson returned alone to the old evidence warehouse, where yellow lights cast down on hundreds of file boxes. She placed the Harper evidence box back on the shelf, this time without a sense of incompleteness. In the silence, she recalled the image of the silver bracelet engraved found amid forest ashes, a symbol of truth that couldn't be burned. Though David Harper had died long ago, the traces he left spoke clearer than any confession. Before leaving, Henderson opened her notebook and wrote the final note for the appraisal phase: "Recovered items from garage confirm active concealment. Every object tells the same story." He tried to erase her, and failed. Outside the window, the warehouse lights illuminated dust particles suspended in the air. Those specks of dust, like evidence, tiny, seemingly meaningless, but when light hits, they always appear. For Henderson, that was the final meaning of the Emily Harper case. Evil can hide, but truth never disappears. After recovering all digital data, Detective Laura Henderson went back for a final sweep of the hard drive from the compact Presario, seized from the Harper home in 2002. She believed that among the leftover draft files, there might be something no one saw 20 years ago. In the Outlook Express local drafts folder, she discovered a file with a creation time stamp of March 6, 2002, 4:17 a.m., just hours after David's phone pinged at the Ocklackney River plantation area. She opened the file, and the text appeared, brief but chilling. "I didn't mean to," she was screaming. Just 8 words, no subject, no recipient. Henderson was silent for a few seconds, feeling the room's air grow colder. She extracted the header, the technical identifier, and the data line displayed clearly: IP 192.168.0.12. Harper residence, Pine Hollow, Thomasville, Georgia. The network address matched the modem at David's home. It couldn't be anyone else. She immediately contacted the digital forensics technician. "Check the file's integrity." Minutes later, he replied, "No signs of tampering. File auto-saved at 4:17 a.m., same day as the disappearance. IP data authenticates source from Harper household device." Henderson set down her pen, eyes fixed on the screen. She whispered, "This is the confession, he just never sent it." She printed the email snippet, pinning it to the board amid the photos: blood in the car, bath towel disposal route, and the silver bracelet. Every arrow on the board converged on a single point: David Harper. Henderson added in red pen, "Digital confession. Unsent." In the next morning's briefing, Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cole scanned the printout and looked up. "Do you think this can count as an admission of guilt?" Henderson replied, "Legally, no, but logically, he wrote it at the exact time, from the exact IP, and the content matches the entire sequence. No one else could have written this." Cole nodded slowly. "Then let's treat it as the final piece." She presented the full electronic evidence to the investigative team. On the projector screen, the green text, "I didn't mean to, she was screaming," loomed large in the quiet room. A technician added, "The program auto-saves when the user closes the window abruptly," meaning he was typing and then stopped. Henderson replied, "Possibly right after returning from disposal." Her report to GBI stated clearly, "Unsent email draft constitutes indirect admission of guilt. Timestamp aligns with established timeline of homicide and disposal route." Upon reading it, Cole sighed. 22 years boiled down to 8 words. Henderson replied softly. He thought he'd erased it all, but data doesn't forget. That evening, she sat alone in the office, watching the dim glow of the screen in the darkness. She imagined David Harper, exhausted, hands trembling, opening the computer in the pre-dawn hours, typing a few words then stopping. Maybe remorse, maybe just fear, but either way, he'd left his own trace. She recalled Ron Avery's words, "No crime is completely silent. There's always an unfinished sentence." And this was that sentence. 3 days later, GBI released the comprehensive investigation report. In the digital evidence section, the conclusion read, "Recovered draft email represents self-authored acknowledgement of act and remorse. Content, timestamp and IP origin confirm alignment with time of victim's death. Together with forensic findings, evidence supports homicide determination beyond reasonable doubt." After reading the report, Cole said slowly, "We have no other hypotheses. It all tells the same story." Henderson replied simply, "And the final storyteller is him." News of the confession email spread quickly through media channels. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran the headline, "Unsent Email Solves Georgia Cold Case." After 22 years, Thomasville residents fell silent upon hearing the revealed content. It was the first time in 2 decades they heard the voice of the killer, not through court, but through frozen words in an email never sent. When reporters asked about the discovery, Henderson said briefly, "He never said a word in court, but the keyboard spoke for him." Late that night, she returned to the evidence room, gazing at Emily's photo pinned in the center of the board. Under the yellow light, the printed email text still stood out. "I didn't mean to." She was screaming. She whispered, almost inaudibly, "Now you've heard the confession he tried to bury." After 22 years, the Emily Harper case finally had it all: DNA, route, motive, scene, and the killer's own indirect confession. On April 12, 2024, Georgia skies were overcast as the GBI Cold Case Unit coordinated with Dougherty County Police to arrest David Harper, the 58-year-old father of Emily Harper. He lived alone in a small house in Albany, over 100 miles from Thomasville, using his real name, doing odd electrical repair jobs, living quietly as if no crime had ever occurred in the past 20 years. Detective Laura Henderson led the task force. When they arrived, David was sitting on the porch, wearing an old shirt, holding a cup of coffee. Seeing the police, he just looked, showing no surprise. Henderson approached, holding up the warrant. "David Harper, you're under arrest for first-degree murder victim Emily Harper." He looked up calmly. "I knew you'd come." On the drive back to headquarters, he stayed silent the whole way. His gaze was vacant, fixed on the car window where light flickered over the fields. When they reached the interrogation room, David sat upright, hands clasped, no trembling, no resistance. Henderson placed the thick file on the table, staring at him for a long moment. "Do you know why we're here?" David shrugged. "Because of the girl." "Yes, because of Emily. 22 years, and finally the girl has been found." He looked up, half smiling, half sighing. "You already found her." The room fell deathly silent. Henderson opened the file, pulling out the photo of the silver bracelet, and placing it before him. "Do you remember this?" "Yes. I gave it to her for her 12th birthday. It was found next to her bones, in the woods you drove to at 2 a.m. on June 3, 2002. David stared at the photo for a long time, then said, "I knew you'd say that. But no one understands. Back then I just wanted her to stop screaming." Henderson looked up, her voice even but cold. "You wrote that in an email at 4:17 a.m. that day." "I didn't mean to." She was screaming. "We've recovered it." A moment of silence, then David chuckled softly. "I'd forgotten about that. So the computer still remembers, huh?" "Yes," Henderson replied, "and data doesn't forgive." She spread the forensic photos across the table: blood in the car, bath towel, hair strand, cell tower pings, crime scene images. It all leads to one place: your house, your car, and your own hands. David looked at them, not denying, just exhaling softly. I guess Avery will be pleased. He always said I was hiding something. Henderson asked directly, why? Why kill her? David replied slowly, almost whispering, it wasn't killing. I just wanted to teach her to be quiet. How? I hit her. She fell. Then, she didn't get up. Henderson gripped her pen tightly. Then you took the body away, cleaned every trace, and went on living like nothing happened. David showed no reaction. I tried to erase it, but I knew one day someone would find out. As the interrogation moved to the second phase, the tech team conducted a search of the Albany house. In the garage, they found a black portable hard drive hidden in a tool cabinet drawer. The drive was rushed to the forensics room that same day. Just hours later, Henderson received an urgent call. You need to see this. On the screen, dozens of photos appeared, images of Emily Harper, many showing the girl in the living room, in pajamas, with bruises on her wrists. The photo metadata recorded the last shots in late May 2002, just days before she vanished. Some photos had been deleted and recovered, showing David had tried to wipe the drive before leaving Thomasville. Henderson stared at the screen for a long time, then turned to her colleague. No doubt anymore. This wasn't just manslaughter. This was abuse, then murder to cover it up. When confronting him, she placed a photo of a smiling Emily before David, her innocent eyes but left arm bruised. You took this one, right? He nodded slightly, his eyes cloudy. I just wanted to keep a picture of her. I knew I wouldn't see her again. Henderson replied, and so you hid it on the hard drive for 22 years. He gave a wry smile. I'm not good at hiding, I'm just good at waiting. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. David never said I killed her, but each answer was enough to reconstruct the crime. Henderson noted in the record, subject displays calm demeanor and partial acknowledgement. Statements align with timeline and forensic evidence. Implicit admission noted. When the interrogation ended, Henderson stood. David asked, what will you do now? She replied curtly, close the suspect loop. All evidence is sufficient. Outside a light rain began. Henderson left the room, leaving behind the man with his head bowed, hands still clasped, gaze distant like someone who had just revisited a past he tried to forget. At GBI offices, the arrest report was finalized. Suspect, David Harper 58. Charges, first-degree murder, child abuse, evidence tampering. All evidence, the portable hard drive, photos, chemical samples was sealed in a new file. Case number C1478-24, replacing the old Harper, Emily, missing person. As she signed the record, Henderson felt an unusual relief. 22 years, every path, from blood under the car carpet to the unsent email, finally led to one place: the father, who once swore he just wanted to teach his daughter to be quiet. Outside the rain thickened. In the pale yellow light of the parking lot, Henderson stood still, looking at the file in her hand. Though the case still had to go to trial, she knew one thing for certain: justice had reached its threshold, and Emily Harper had finally spoken. After being arrested, David Harper was transferred to the Lowndes County Jail, awaiting his preliminary hearing. The Georgia state prosecutor charged him with 3 counts: second-degree murder, child abuse, and tampering with evidence. Despite being nearly 60 years old, he remained alert and calm during all interrogation sessions. The press described him as a man with a gentle appearance, but harboring sins deeper than time itself. Detective Laura Henderson followed every development closely. To her, the case was closed on the investigative front, but justice remained unfinished, something that could only be shaped in the courtroom. In February 2025, the case file for State versus David Harper was filed with the Thomas County Superior Court. The prosecution prepared the full body of evidence: Emily's DNA, the cell tower route, the Plan B receipt, the unsent email, the photos of the bruised wrist, all of it strong enough to secure a conviction. On his first court appearance, David wore an orange prison jumpsuit, his hair cropped short, his eyes dull. When the judge read the charges, he said only one thing: "I understand." No plea, no objection, just quietly signing the acknowledgement form. Henderson, seated in the back row, felt the air thicken. Dorothy Harper, the victim's mother, was also present. As David was led away, she looked straight at him and said softly but firmly, "Emily forgave you long before I did. But the law won't." He didn't turn back. The next hearing was scheduled for July 2025, where the prosecution would formally present the indictment. But it never happened. On the morning of June 18, 2025, the Lowndes County Jail reported that David Harper had been found unconscious in his cell. According to the report, he suddenly collapsed while reading a book, with no signs of violence. Medical staff attempted resuscitation, but at 8:42 a.m., he was pronounced dead. The coroner's report determined the cause as pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that traveled to the lungs, causing sudden blockage. The news stunned Henderson. When she received the call from the jail warden, she asked only one question: "Did he say anything before collapsing?" "No, ma'am," the other replied. "He just asked for writing paper." 3 days later, Henderson received a sealed envelope containing the only piece of paper found in the cell. It bore a single scrawled line in handwriting: "Tell Dorothy I saw her eyes before the lights went out." Not an apology, just the final remnant of a man who once believed he could escape justice. The Evening News Bulletin reported it briefly: David Harper, 58, suspect in the 2002 murder of his daughter Emily Harper, died in Lowndes County Jail from natural causes. The case file is now marked suspect deceased. There was no formal funeral. His ashes were claimed by a distant relative in Florida. The court, per procedure, closed the file without a trial. In the final record, a cold notation read, "Case terminated. Suspect deceased prior to trial." For Henderson, that ending left a greater emptiness than the arrest. During the wrap-up briefing, when a reporter asked if she considered it a victory, she replied, "We proved what happened." The court just never got to say it. Dorothy, upon hearing of David's death, did not cry. She only sighed, "Maybe God decided the rest. I once thought I'd hear him say, 'I'm sorry,' but silence is an answer too." In the GBI office, Henderson placed the Harper case file back on the shelf. On the cover, a new label read, "Status closed, suspect deceased." Below it, she added in blue pen, "Justice confirmed, verdict unspoken." That night, she drove to Ocklackney River Plantation, where everything had once begun and ended. The forest had regenerated. After last year's fire, young saplings greening the soil that had once hidden the truth. Henderson stood silently in that clearing, imagining the image of the blonde little girl smiling in the breeze. 23 years, the case had gone through every phase, from disappearance, investigation, cover-up, re-examination, to the crime being proven. But justice had come not through a trial, but through the stopping of the killer's heart. As she returned to her car, Henderson glanced at the small photo of Emily taped to the dashboard. She whispered, her voice light as the wind, "We found the truth, Emily. It's just a shame the court never got to say it out loud." The Emily Harper case officially closed, with no verdict, no jury, only the truth and silence. But sometimes, that silence is the most resounding judgment justice can deliver for a crime. In August 2025, 3 months after David Harper's death, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, released a comprehensive report exceeding 200 pages, the official document closing the Emily Harper case, one of the state's most notorious cold cases. The report was compiled from over 4,000 pages of transcripts, tests, digital data, and statements, synthesized into a detailed reconstruction of the entire sequence of events from the night of the disappearance in 2002 to the day the case was solved. At the press conference at GBI headquarters in Atlanta, Sheriff Walter Reeves opened with a somber statement: "Technology gave a voice to the dead. It spoke for Emily when no one else could." After him, Detective Laura Henderson and Lieutenant Ernest Cole presented the key points of the report. On the large screen behind them, each section appeared, one number, one piece of evidence at a time, each a fragment of the truth that 2 decades earlier could only be guessed at. DNA analysis. The first section stated clearly, vehicle forensic results. The GBI lab confirmed that the 0.003 milliliters human blood sample found under the carpet of the Dodge Charger contained DNA matching Dorothy Harper's genetic profile, confirming direct lineage, Emily Harper. Though an extremely small trace amount, the results achieved 99.99% reliability. The report emphasized the blood was chemically treated but remained detectable due to microtrace preservation. Henderson added, "Science today is strong enough to hear the voice of a single drop of blood, even if it's only left in the memory of the evidence." Cell tower route reconstruction. Cell tower reconstruction. Using coordinate ping analysis software, the expert team reconstructed the path of David's phone on the night of June 3, 2002. The ping points matched perfectly with the route from Pine Hollow, Bainbridge, Ocklackney River Plantation, Thomasville, pinpointing the disposal site to within a 600-meter radius. Each point was cross-referenced with real-time gas receipts, forming an airtight chain that could not be denied. In the conclusion section, the expert team noted, movement pattern consistent with disposal activity. No alternative explanation plausible. Digital data, unsent email, digital confession. The most attention-grabbing evidence was the draft email file, timestamped 4:17 a.m., June 3, 2002, content, "I didn't mean to." She was screaming. Recovered from the compact Presario hard drive, that line was viewed as an indirect confession, aligning perfectly with the time of the victim's death and David's movements. The report stated, though not legally classified as a confession, digital metadata confirms author identity and timestamp corresponding to the night of the homicide. Time of the crime combining phone analysis, medical records, and bone tissue examination. The report determined that Emily was attacked and died between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. on the night of June 2, 2002. Before David left home for the night shift. Around the same time, neighbors reported hearing faint screams and metallic impacts, once dismissed due to lack of evidence. All aligned with the bloodstains, Clorox traces in the garage, and the victim's skull examination results. Mechanism of death. The coroner's report specified, cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull. The skull fractures were consistent with a strong blow from a blunt object, likely a hammer handle or pipe. There were no signs of prolonged struggle, indicating the victim was struck unexpectedly. Henderson explained in the notes, he wasn't prepared to kill, but when things spiraled out of control, his actions became the final decision. Motive from digital data, Plan B searches, STD records, and recovered photos. The prosecution concluded the murder motive stemmed from abuse and fear of exposure. The report noted, pattern of abuse and concealment evident through digital and behavioral evidence. Killing was to silence the victim and erase evidence. Overall conclusion GBI Cold Case Unit, 2025, all forensic digital and testimonial evidence aligns to a single offender, David Harper. Sequence of events reconstructed beyond reasonable doubt. Motive, fear of exposure, following prolonged abuse. Manner of death, homicide. At the press conference, Lieutenant Cole stated, "We didn't just find the killer, we proved what 22 years ago, people only sensed intuitively." The report included a dedicated section acknowledging the efforts of Detective Ron Avery, the original 2002 investigator, with the note, "Initial intuition led to preservation of key evidence, later critical to solving the case." Below it was Henderson's inscription, he wrote, "Preserve the rope," and he was right. Time kept the evidence safe for us. The final page of the report was the official conclusion from the GBI Forensic Review Board, stating, despite the suspect's death prior to trial, investigative findings closed the Harper case with conclusive proof of guilt. Justice was achieved through truth, not verdict. In a post-release interview, a reporter asked Henderson about her emotions in closing the file. She replied briefly, "Evidence doesn't lie. Time just delays the truth." Dorothy Harper was also invited to speak. Holding her daughter's photo, her voice trembled but was clear. "They say technology helped find the perpetrator. I think God helped me wait long enough to hear the truth." That afternoon, Henderson returned to her office and placed the thick report on the case file shelf. Under the light, the new cover gleamed with the words "Case Harper, Emily, status, solved." She sat silently for a few minutes, looking at the photo of the little girl on the wall. Below the photo was a quote she had written in blue pen, a farewell in place of the entire 23-year journey. Technology gave a voice to the dead, evidence spoke for her, and time finally listened. For Henderson, the Emily Harper case was not just an investigation, but proof of the power of science and human perseverance. Justice may be delayed, but truth always comes, even if it takes a lifetime. When the Emily Harper case summary report was released, Thomasville, the small town that seemed to have forgotten the 2002 story, suddenly stirred. News flooded local stations, print papers, and social media. In front of the town hall, residents gathered to read the bulletin posted on the announcement board. The large headline in the Thomasville Times-Enterprise read, "GBI confirms 2002 child murder, father identified as perpetrator." Many cried while watching TV replays of old images, missing person flyers, the photo of the blonde little girl beaming beside her birthday cake, and the scene of the Ocklackney Woods where the remains were found. 23 years, the pain was revived once more, but this time with the truth. A week later, a memorial for Emily Harper was held at Cherokee Lake Park, where her grandmother used to take the little girl to feed the ducks. Hundreds of Thomasville residents attended, bringing white flowers and heart-shaped balloons. Petals were released onto the still lake surface, reflecting the flickering candlelight in the sunset glow. In the circle of people, Dorothy Harper, with silver hair and a voice hoarse with emotion, stood at the wooden podium, speaking slowly. She just wanted to be loved, to be safe. "I once feared she'd be forgotten. But today, looking around, I know Emily is still in everyone's hearts." After her, former teacher Margaret Summers, who had taught Emily in 6th grade, stepped up to share, "Emily just wanted peace at home. She always sat in the back of the class, loved drawing and talking about little dogs. No one imagined that child was carrying such a lonely world inside." As a gentle breeze rustled the trees, Pastor Rudy Franklin from New Birth Tabernacle of Praise, the man who led the 2002 search campaign, stood to speak. His voice rang steady, but carried the bitterness of someone who had witnessed too many cases forgotten. "Closure is not justice. Justice is vigilance. We can't say the case is over just because the perpetrator is dead. We must learn to protect other children, so there is no second Emily." That speech was quoted on the evening news, becoming the slogan for a new movement in Georgia. After the ceremony, social organizations and schools in Thomas County jointly held workshops on reforming missing child investigation procedures. The GBI report had pointed out that in 2002, Emily's case was misclassified as a runaway, delaying the search by nearly a week. That figure became a wake-up call for the system. A month later, the Thomasville mayor signed an order establishing the Emily Harper Foundation, a fund to support young victims of abuse and missing children. The foundation's goal is to provide psychological counseling, legal aid, and emergency response training for parents. Henderson was invited to serve as honorary advisor. At the launch event, she said, "We can't change the past, but we can use the truth to save the futures of other children." Emily's name began appearing on signs at schools, parks, community centers. A memorial plaque erected by Cherokee Lake read, "In memory of Emily Harper 1990-2002. Her story taught us to listen, Local media called the case a technological turning point in cold case investigations. Georgia Police Academies incorporated the Emily Harper case into training programs as a prime example of how digital data and DNA forensics can revive justice. In her final interview with GBI News, Henderson shared, "What haunts me isn't the crime, but the silence. Emily tried to speak so many times, but no one listened. Now thanks to technology, we've heard that voice, late, but clear." Dorothy, now in her 70s, set up a small altar at home beside a frame of Emily, in her birthday hat. She told a reporter, "She finally has her own voice, and I believe somewhere, she's at peace." Emily's story spread across Georgia, referenced in speeches on child protection, featured in a WSB-TV short documentary, titled, "The Silence That Spoke." The film ended with footage of the memorial at Cherokee Lake, hundreds releasing white balloons into the sky. On the news screen, Emily's photo appeared, the little girl's smiling face in soft light. The narrator's voice closed not just the film, but the journey spanning over 2 decades. Her story reminds Georgia, no disappearance should ever be dismissed as a runaway. Below that line, the screen faded to black, leaving only the lake's reflection and drifting petals, a symbol of a justice not declared by verdict, but by a community's awakening. From that day on, Thomasville residents no longer used the word runaway lightly. They used the little girl's name, Emily Harper, as a reminder. Some stories seem buried, but with one persistent person, the truth will always be found. Looking at the Emily Harper story, America today has at least 3 very practical lessons for every family and community to apply. First, don't let a missing case be hastily labeled runaway and delay response. Emily was misclassified, slowing the search by nearly a week later. The 2:12 a.m. cell tower route to Ocklackney River Plantation and the Bainbridge gas receipt redrew the disposal path. Lesson: when a child loses unusual contact, report to 911 immediately, demand instant information dissemination, and ask authorities directly about technical steps, camera checks, phone pings, card data sweeps. Second, digital evidence and trace amounts don't lie. 0.003 milliliters of blood under the car carpet. The 4:17 a.m. draft email reading, "I didn't mean to," she was screaming. The Plan B receipt and STD records, all resonating as the victim's voice. Lesson: in family crises, preserve the scene, don't clean up. For digital devices, don't delete anything, seal it, and get guidance from lawyers, digital investigators. Third, child safety starts with a vigilant community. The memorial at Cherokee Lake Park and the Emily Harper Foundation show. Closure is not justice, justice is vigilance. Teachers, pastors, neighbors are all mandated reporters under U.S. law. If you see bruises like Emily's wrist photos, fear, isolation, report to CPS or the 1-800-4-A-CHILD hotline. At the family level, set a 3 trusted adults rule for kids, teach distress signaling skills, maintain regular check-ins outside school hours, and keep domestic abuse support contacts handy. Finally, remember Henderson's words, evidence doesn't lie. Time just delays the truth. When we persist, preserving evidence, demanding procedures, and speaking out, the truth arrives sooner, and may save a child right now. Thank you for following the story of Emily Harper, where justice came late, but still found a voice for the truth. If you believe no disappearance should ever be forgotten, subscribe to the channel so we can continue telling the stories time once tried to hide.